Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction, Dom. I know my title is a bit of a mouthful, but I want to talk to you all today about policy storytelling. And this is rather fortuitous time, and actually really want to thank Mikhail Marin and the community team for inviting me here. Actually, at the beginning of this month, I did not think I would be on the stage talking about this, but CSIS is on the verge of releasing several new products, specifically visualization products this year, and you're going to get to see one of them today. Before I do that, though, I do want to give you guys a little bit of context about what we do, what we produce. We are a think tank. Our main primary output are informational, public, user-facing products. We want to inform the policy debate and hopefully persuade business leaders and policymakers to make better decisions. So, to give you a history, about 5 years ago, CSIS made the decision to start building issue-focused microsites, basically websites that were separate from our main website at csis.org. They had their own information architecture. They were developed around a specific set of content. And one of these projects was called the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative, or AMTI. And the purpose of AMTI was to explore specifically the complex legal and political issues that surrounded the Asian littoral, the East China Sea, South China Sea, Indo-Pacific. And one of the things that really got us on the map here was this. This is the front page of the New York Times, April 2015. AMTI is about 5 months old here, and just a few weeks before, we had contracted with Digital Globe to send their satellites over the South China Sea. Now, if you're not familiar with this image, this is revealing a troubling activity by the Chinese military in which they were taking basically large ships, dredgers, sticking tubes down to the bottom of the ocean, and then dumping tons and tons of sand and concrete onto coral reefs. And they were building basically military outposts, runways, helicopters, helicopter pads, missile launchers. And the release of these images really changed the debate on this issue. It was not known publicly that this was happening. Of course, the intelligence community knew that it was happening. They had access to this imagery. And here we have Jeff Dyer, the Financial Times, crediting us with really changing and influencing that debate. It forced the governments of the United States and China to publicly reckon with what was happening. But institutionally, we learned something really important from this episode and this experience, and it's this. Powerful visuals presented well, emphasis on that, make these headlines possible. Now, if you went to the default mode of think tanks before 2012, 2011, what was their default? It was a book. They would publish 100, 150-page PDFs that would be no more than ridiculous paperweights that sat on a congressman or woman's desk, never to be read. That was their output. But we went to where audiences could be, and we made these images accessible to the world. Here's a really good example of one of the outputs. This is Admiral Harry Harris. He was the commander of PACOM. The great irony of this photo is, of course, Admiral Harris had access to this imagery before. He had access to all the classified imagery, but he couldn't show it publicly, much less to Congress. But here he is pointing to one of our marked up images of a Fiery Cross Reef, where our analysts took a look at these facilities and said, this is where the airstrip is, this is where the barracks are. And this is an AP photo of him presenting to the House Intelligence Committee. All right, so that was 5 years ago. What have we been up to in the time since? Well, one of the staples of what CSIS produces is what you see here on the left. Two-dimensional, data-driven, interactive maps powered by the Mapbox API. And what you're seeing here specifically is a cataloging of all the complex interwebs of legal and maritime claims by 26 Asia-Pacific countries. You can see here just how kind of crazy and intertangled it gets in the South China Sea. So this accompanies a lot of our research projects. It accompanies a lot of what we call long-form or storytelling experiences where we're putting these maps, we're trying to show that geodata and present it in an engaging and fresh way, not in just a book or not in just a static chart. So late last year, we did another groundbreaking kind of commercial imagery study about North Korean missile bases. And we said, how can we present this differently? How can we do this differently than we have done it in the past 5 years, technologically and creatively? And so I'm going to be showing you today one of our new products. It's the first of hopefully many. And if our fabulous AV team can cue it up, we'll play the video.
So the Sakkanmal base was a base that there's not a lot known about in the public domain. Of course, the intelligence community knows about this. It's a base that's very close to the border between North and South Korea and is an operational missile base. North Korea has a whole bunch of missile bases that they have had for some time that are operational, but they've never disclosed these things, even though under UN Security Council resolutions they are required to abandon all of these bases. These are arrayed along the peninsula and pose real operational threats to U.S. forces in Korea and Japan. What we tried to do with this report was to, one, give the best open source, unclassified imagery analysis of this base that exists today. You can't negotiate denuclearization with a country that doesn't admit having the things that you want them to get rid of. Reports like this, again, I think inform the public policy debate and the media so that when they write and talk about this negotiation, they're doing it in a way that is well-informed and that really tries to address the question of what true denuclearization is on the Korean Peninsula.
All right. How did we do that? I'm going to surprise some of the developers in the room, and I'm going to say, I did not write a single line of code to produce what you just saw. It is an implementation and an integration between the Mapbox API, Mapbox Studio Styles, and After Effects, Adobe After Effects. Adobe After Effects is one of the most powerful out-of-the-box applications in which we can design motion and video. I had access to all the benefits and features of After Effects. I could do color correction, timing out the animations, and you saw with that canyon fly through, I can have complete and utter control over camera movements. So I'm going to go over a very top-level look at how this works and how you can actually go through this process yourself. But it starts with a very simple studio base map. In this case, since we're using satellite imagery, and that was key to our story, we use the stock satellite base layer from Mapbox. But what we changed in this was our geospatial analysts provided me with geotiffs. And so I could overlay specific imagery, in this case the Sakkanmal missile base, of a certain time and optimize for viewability. So I'm not just using the default imagery. This was taken back in November. It's the most recent stuff that we had access to. And then very similar to how you would instantiate it within a web application, we do the same thing in After Effects. We have our access token, our account name, and the map ID. And then that gets ingested into the program. The default, as you see here, is kind of washed out. Geospatial analysts, they're not designers. So they are preparing their images for their benefit so that they can actually figure out exactly where certain facilities and features are. So it has to go through a bit of a design process. And so this was what we started with, and that's what we ended with. You can see I upped the contrast, really made those colors pop. I put in some more custom overlays. But this is really just an inkling of what we can start doing with this technology. We can start going into this, and really our imagination's the limit. What can we design to make this better? What can we change going forward? I'm really excited about that possibility. And just for reference, this is not a default functionality of Adobe After Effects. There are a number of add-ons and patches that you have to apply to make this actually work. I'm happy to discuss that later, but it gets kind of a nerdy motion design-y territory, but I love talking about it. All right. some observations, some postmortems about this product. Low hardware requirements. One thing that we have struggled with, especially in presenting to governmental audiences, is that their computers aren't as advanced as the ones that we have. We've had difficulty with showing some of the more advanced Mapbox maps to our folks in DoD. They block CDNs. They might not have hardware acceleration. They might have a GPU. And as a result, they complain to us and say, oh, we can't load your maps. I will tell you a funny story. When we first released AMTI, it was our first big web project. I was very nervous about it. I was like, oh, God, somebody's going to hack this site, bring it down, DDoS us, something like that. And I dotted my I's, crossed my T's. And I said, we're going to get HTTPS, SSL certification, two-factor authentication, enforcing strong passwords. So we were invited to do a presentation at the EEOB. And I'm talking on the phone with a logistics person. And I say, oh, I did all these things. It's very secure. And do you know what question he asked me? He said, can you put it on a CD-ROM? I was kind of blown away by that. It was not the question I was expecting to be asked. Fortunately, we found a workaround. But knowing that those limitations exist in government and knowing that audience might not be able to run the latest and greatest is very important. And this is where video gets to be very useful, because I can't put that on a CD-ROM. The other benefit, of course, is video is direct and effective. I control the narrative there. I built that. We scripted that out, and we had a very specific message that we wanted to get across. And I think we did that very effectively. And the last, I hope you've derived from the context here, is I didn't need a developer to build this. Now, I don't want the developers to get mad at me, please. One thing that I hope to do in the future is actually introduce developers into this workflow, because there are a lot of repetitive design tasks that could be easily operationalized through code. All right. Enough about the technology. I do want to talk a bit about our people and how we do this at CSIS and what our method is. This is a picture of our team. To borrow the phrase from Tom Hanks in A League of Their Own, there is no crying in baseball. I am one of the few men on this team. I hope somebody takes a picture and tweets this at me, because I wasn't here. I am actually on parental leave right now. But the main thing I want to get across here by showing this is that we are an integrated product team. These folks are not all photographers or videographers or developers, for that matter. We're a mix of all those things. And we make no bureaucratic or administrative distinction between those skills. In a lot of nonprofits I've worked for is that they inexplicably would have our photography team on the 3rd floor with its own staff and its own budget, and then the web team on the 1st floor with its own staff and their own budget. We don't believe in that. We have everybody working under the same roof and working under the same administration. And secondarily, it isn't just about the technical and creative expertise that we're bringing to this. It's also about the collaboration with our research arm, who are not technically or as creatively talented. And for the past 6.5 years working at CSIS, I've really taken away these really 3 main points. Is that not all researchers are going to be extremely data literate in a way that they will understand how to build a simple data visualization like a map, or for that matter, dare I say it, a pie chart. Secondarily, also, teach abstraction. How does visual abstraction work? Policy researchers have a tendency to be extremely literal. And showing how visuals can help explain a story in fewer words and fewer bells and whistles is an art. It's hard to do. But lastly, I really want to end on this point. Don't do things for the sake of doing them. Even though that video might be very cool, my first question, if anybody comes up to me and asks me, well, I want to do that too, my first question back is going to be, well, what's your story? What story do you want to tell? And what's your research say? From there, we can figure out what the best medium is for your message. Thank you very much.